Today I'm going to talk about painting up a couple of Striders for Mantic Games Deadzone, 3rd edition, which is kind of the equivalent to Games Workshop's Kill Team, although to be fair, it did predate Kill Team.
These were a lot of fun to paint. I mean, they'd sat around in the garage for years, since I think I played a few games of Deadzone 2 a few years ago. They were a real pain, I remember, to assemble. For whatever reason, the glue didn't seem to take to whatever the resting material was, and holding the arms in the right position and getting the gun to come along on the journey was painful. But I always thought they looked gorgeous, and they really remind me of...
I mean, my money was always on the AMP suit in Avatar.
And I used an Necron Abyss to paint in the 3 panels of windscreen. And they look pretty awful. They look very bland. But the Necron Abyss was still drying. It took quite a long time to dry, which was great, because then I took one of the normal kind of mid-level blues and just kept adding little bits into the Necron Abyss, and then adding it in onto the windscreen, painting up where the sun seemed to be, not the sun, where the my light source seemed to be glinting off. And that came out quite well, I thought. And then it still didn't look like a windscreen, and I thought, well, what else could I do? And I thought, well, maybe like in the same way as when you drive along a motorway, well, in the old days when there were still insects, and you know, the insects would just splatter onto your windscreen. Well, maybe now that's what happens with these. In the future, that's what will happen with these giant Striders. And so I just took my thinnest brush and put flecks, well, I just streaked a few lines of blue, imagining that insect or high velocity weaponry had hit the armor-plated windscreen, and then I just highlighted them once or twice with by adding a little bit of white. And I think actually that's given it a degree of realism, because what I understand now is that with armored miniatures, you can't just keep highlighting and layering them up to, or dry brushing to give the detail you need. The dry brushing always ends up looking a bit weird. You've got to find ways of weathering or highlight, just giving a sense of this armor being lived in. And so I took a bit of I forgot what it's called, the little packing material that you get in blisters, and pulled little bits off, and I went through 3 different colors, of silver, black, and a little bit of yellow mixed in with the army painter green. And I just dabbed in the edges where I thought that there might be a bit of scraping and bashing going along, chipping off the edges of the paint. And I realized again that using my big fat fingers probably wasn't that sensible, because although it gave me a lot of dexterity in terms of where I went, I couldn't keep it that precise. And I think what I might do is invest in a pair of tweezers, which I think I've seen done by others, and you hold the bit of packaging material in the tweezers, and then you dab it into the paint, get rid of most of the paint onto a piece of kitchen roll, and then you just dab it into the places that you need. So you can see there's a bit of black still, you can see all over the place, and the green, well, you can see over there. The green was probably the least successful of this. I had some decals from a Soviet World War II tank, the Warlord Games pack of 3. They weren't T-34s, they were a bigger tank, the name of which has now escaped me.
That's the one, IS-2.
And then I just did a bit of that effect I just described over the decals. The decals came off nicely. This was the first successful application of decals I've ever done, because the last time I did it, they were from some orc decals, which were about 20 years old, and they just cracked on arrival on the miniature and had to be binned. So these worked. First successful use of decals over there. Then I used some of this, doing my best not to inhale any of this very fine powder. I probably should have used a mask, but I only did it for a short while. And I'm not really sure how to use it. What I did was I thought, look, this is going to be fine dirt, and where would fine dirt be? I suppose it would get sucked into the holes of any ventilation type equipment, but I wasn't really sure how to apply it. So what I did was I took some of the varnish, which I normally paint over a miniature at the end, just to seal it all in, and I just applied some here and onto the feet, which you can see over there and over there, and then I just ladled some on with the sculpting tool, and then took my fat finger and went wish, wish, smudge. And I thought to myself, there must be a more professional way of doing this. So if anyone watching this actually knows how to properly apply the stuff, do let me know. I mean, I didn't want to make these look like they were absolutely caked in filth, because, you know, this is the future and these aren't orc vehicles. Look at that slightly more successful bit of chipping. So sometimes it does work. And I'm quite happy with them. And for scale, they are quite chunky. There's one of the old Space Marines.
And now it's time to lock and load for our next game of Deadzone version 3 next week. Or at least rock and roll towards it. Well, that's it for this time. Why not comment and let me know if you actually know how to use that weathering pigment. Do like to show that this was of some interest, and subscribe if you want to see how these guys actually perform in their very first game of Deadzone 3.